I'm not generally one to toot my own horn, but the Barbra banding signing is one that I will. It was like 3 or 4 weeks of not sleeping very much and making a lot of "what have you done for me lately" calls.
We are joined by Orlando Pride General Manager Haley Carter. Thank you so much for joining us, Haley.
Yeah,
big week this week.
Yeah,
how's it
exciting.
going? I was gonna say, what are the vibes? How's the energy right now?
Good. It's a pretty quick turnaround. We just got back from LA yesterday, and the team has an off day to kind of get their lives together, and then 2 days in, quick turnaround. But
yeah, I was gonna say, I think maybe underrated, right? The coming off an away trip. It's a shorter away trip this time, but a big turnaround for the team.
Big turnaround. It's as soon as we were done in LA, we were focusing on Kansas City already. So good vibes.
I'm sure. But let's talk about that. We were chit-chatting about it very briefly before we hopped on camera. This is a huge week for the league. It's not just for these two teams, but this is, by my opinion, from a media standard, I say this is the marquee regular season matchup of the season, at least the first half of the season. What does it feel like to be in the middle of what's just going to be a really exciting weekend for the league? Last weekend before Olympians go off to international duty, two top teams on the table, neck and neck. I mean, I was, joking about it, even with goal differentials exactly the same. These are two teams that are on similar trajectories. How's it been being in the middle of all that this week?
It's been fun. When Seb and I came in at the beginning of last season, right, I think we had a pretty clear vision and a shared alignment and values and what we wanted to do with the club and where we wanted to bring it. And, but I don't think that we would have imagined being where we're at as quickly as where we're at. So, we try not to think about it too much, being at the top of the table week in and week out. And I don't even want to think about the standings. We just go 1 week at a time. The athletes are similar, right? Like, we just do what we do. We can't focus on anybody else or what other results are or anything like that. And, last year we were in a position where we had lots of opportunities to jump above the playoff line, and we never made it happen. And then, you get to the end of the season and your destiny is fate, and fate really relies on other teams. And, we told ourselves we don't ever want to be in that situation. We want to be able to control our fate and control our destiny. And so this year, being where we're at and going into the midseason break, sitting at the top of the table, and what has been a really, really exciting season is, it's good. It's a good place to be.
Yeah, totally. Well, mentioning last season, you guys probably, the Pride probably don't actually get enough credit for being in that playoff race all the way to the end of the season. That last weekend, people talk about who fell in, who fell out. What were those, you talk about those building blocks going into this season. What were some of the things that you wanted to implement with this roster last year, maybe, and then carrying that into this year, build upon?
Well, it's a long-term process, and building a roster takes multiple transfer windows, multiple entry mechanisms. We knew that we wanted to go and get a real dangerous goal scorer, right? We needed a very dangerous threat. And, we started conversations with Barbra and her agent during the World Cup last year. And we knew that it was going to be a process, and the timing aligned. I think on that, it's really interesting. I've seen a lot of conversations around that transfer and allocation money and the rules around all of that. I think it's really important to make the note, if you weren't paying attention, not a cent of allocation money was used in her transfer fee. Orlando had a history of hoarding transfer or allocation money, and we still have quite a bit of that, but we're using that for salary buy down, because one of the priorities is attracting talent, but paying that talent what they're worth. And so, when you look across the league, we have the best paid roster. That's really important to me. So when we were building out the roster, especially in last season, it's, could we keep that core group of young players that were performing consistently, that we knew had a really strong developmental pathway? And then could we look to bring in some special pieces? And obviously, like, starting in the back line with bringing in Rafaeli last year, locking in Emily Sams for a longer contract, and then bringing in special pieces, right, with the Brazilians who came into midfield, Luana, Angelina, and then continuing to just add, like, up through the front line. And then, of course, Barbra's like icing on the cake. But it was a very deliberate build really where we wanted to shore up our defense, and we wanted to make sure we kept our free agents, right? We kept the likes of Kylie Strom, and we locked in Haley McCutcheon for a longer contract and things like that. So really keeping that group of athletes together, because we knew what was happening in that locker room and what we were building at our training facility was really special. And so ensuring that we were keeping those vibes and all of that going was going to be really important.
The Pride have been in the conversation for landing major free agents over the last couple of years. Always, I think people, like you said, there's this understanding that the Pride are very good at delineating resources, but then what is the big buy, right? Everyone was saying, like, what are the big players that the team is putting these resources together to get, and how do you do that while maintaining the roster? And I think, the team doesn't shy away from, not wanting to be too top heavy. But like you said, I mean, we've seen just kind of one-to-one, having a player like Barbra Banda makes a difference. So for you as a general manager, what is that behind the scenes work of maybe players that you don't necessarily land, or things that don't quite work out, to build to be able to have that one major signing of a player of her caliber?
Well, I think it's interesting because, we went after a couple of free agents last year, but something that's really important in Orlando specifically, and something that Seb and I really believe, is that names don't necessarily win championships, and Orlando's history demonstrates that. So when you look at Orlando's history of having big names, that has not necessarily translated to success. So as we're building it out, we're looking for athletes that are really going to fit into the culture that we're building, and that are going to work well together as a team. And so you go after the likes of Barbra. Barbra is an incredible teammate. She's salt of the earth, very humble, comes in, does the work, works harder than anybody. Her and Marta both are just extremely hard workers. And when you look at what Marta has done for the game and the potential of the things that Barbra has to do for the game, like, you're talking about two of the world's best players, I think, in the history of the game, and their attitude and what they bring to the locker room and to the team is really important. So when we were building things out from a free agency perspective, and looking at international transfers, and even our draft picks are the same way. We sort of approach it the same, with the same set of values. There's an entire world of talented footballers out there.
Yeah.
And so for us, like, making sure we're bringing in the right people who are really going to fit into the culture. And the reality is our culture isn't for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Coming into a space where no one is bigger than the club, from the vice president to a 6-time FIFA World Player of the Year, like, none of us are bigger than the club. And really getting buy-in behind that, and everybody's puts the team success above their own individual success. Like, that's hard to do sometimes. So that's really what we look for. As far as the behind the scenes conversations, you put your best foot forward, and I think winning helps,
Yep.
in spurring interest. But even in the conversations that we had, like, it's a priority for us to make sure that players, athletes, and staff members know here they're valued. Everyone here has value. So whether you're a trialist who comes in for 72 hours, or you're a marquee signing like Barbra, you're treated the same way. You're not treated any different. You get the same level of attention, same level of focus from the staff. And we're creating an environment that isn't just safe, but it's fun to be. And I think you can see on our athletes' faces, like, how much fun they're having and how much fun our staff are having. It's a really special group. So really fortunate to be a part of it.
And taking that maybe even one step further, you talk about, being in line for free agents. That's more domestic conversations, or building through the draft. I mean, I'm just telling you, Orlando, obviously has had really, really good drafts the last couple of years, picked up those, like you said, not only quality, you look like a player like Emily Sams, where obviously very talented, but such a nice anchor, even just as a leader to that back line. But the NWSL has seen, especially this season, this infusion of international talent after maybe coming out of the pandemic, maybe, and some of the upheaval in the league. There was always this question of, where does the NWSL rank, or when players are considering making moves?
Yeah.
How have you found that as a general manager? Like you said, the resource allocation is so strong in Orlando, but has league perception affected anything, even in a positive way, in the last year?
I think perhaps. I mean, I'll be honest with you. Like, we have not, we got Hafa in, and Hafa and I played together in Houston. So we've known each other for a really, really long time. And which helped in having those conversations. And she, wants to be closer to her family. And there's a lot of reasons why players make the decisions that they want to make. And it's not always about playing in the most competitive league or playing in Champions League. I will say that I think you have athletes who've made the transition, like Esther, for instance, in New
Mhm.
York, who's come in and has said every game is like playing in a Champions League game, and there's parity, and so I think you see players transition. We haven't necessarily, because I'll be honest, like we've gone after athletes like Barbra or
Mhm.
Grace, who, Grace, especially for instance, is sort of a diamond in the rough. I think
Mhm.
because she didn't get playing time in the World Cup last summer, she just didn't have the visibility, but the potential
Mhm.
that she has as well with the right investment, the right staff, and the right resources is significant. So for us, like trying to find those athletes who have the ability to contribute, and you look at Barbara, right? And thanks to Brexit and the UK's immigration and their rules around FA Women's Super League, a lot of those athletes from Africa, just based on where their teams are ranked, cannot get visas to play in FA Women's Super League. So to
Right.
be able to bring Barbara into this environment, and Timwa and others, is really exciting. It's exciting for the league, and I think, if I were to win the lottery tomorrow, I tell people this: I would go and build a youth academy in Africa immediately.
Mhm.
I would
Yeah.
invest all of my resources in that. The talent pool coming out of Africa is just incredible. So there's some exciting stuff happening there. So being able to attract those players, but making sure that the timing is right, right? That they're going to be comfortable, and they're going to be able to make an impact and be successful in the league is important. But
How has your background, and for people who might not know, you played for the Dash in sort of the early years of NWSL,
oh
and
yes,
then came into this role, but with a wealth of, you did some club work, but also going into some of these, or being an assistant coach for some of these countries. You worked
yeah,
with the Afghanistan women's national team. Talk about overlooked talent, or just sort of understanding those pipelines, and like you said, making sure the timing is right where people are ready for that opportunity. How has that background led to, or have you felt like that background has aided you in these first couple
yeah.
years as a general
I
manager?
can tell you, like I'm not generally one to toot my own horn, but the Barbara Banding signing is one that I will.
Hmm.
Um,
You should.
be,
It's
I
yeah.
mean, obviously money makes the world go round, so we were able to get that deal done. But there was a lot of commercial posturing and a lot of lawyering and a lot of phone calls and relationships that I used to get that across the line.
Hmm.
That if I had not worked in those positions and had those experiences and those relationships and that network, there's no way I would have been able to pull it off.
Hmm.
And so I think maybe the casual fan might look at it and say, "Oh, well, you just paid her buyout," and no, that it still took some convincing.
Hmm.
And yeah, like I said, like there was just there. One day I could probably write a book about just that transaction
Yeah.
alone. But
Right. Yeah.
I think being an attorney and being a former international coach and having that network and understanding as well the dynamics of what athletes who play in sort of these developing member associations go through, and what
Hmm.
that looks like for them and the resources that they get, and some of the issues that they navigate, right? Like everyone's aware of the sexual assault allegations and
Hmm.
coercion allegations against the Zambia women's national team coach, for instance. Like those things are not unfamiliar to me. And
Yeah.
so I think having that context and having that background and having a strong sense of the environment that we want to create and what we can do for those athletes is really helpful. But yeah, I truly lived many lives in my 20s and 30s, and so I'm incredibly fortunate to be able to bring that entire skill set to it. But I would say all of it culminated in the Barbara Banda signing, because it was like 3 or 4 weeks of not sleeping very much and
Hmm.
making a lot of "what have you done for me lately" calls. So
Well, and even beyond, I mean, again, from my purview, that Banda signing so good for the like fans in the league. You see Zambian fans in every single city,
yeah,
coming to watch a player like Banda. It's so nice to have someone like her in the league. But even for you having that experience and the trajectory of the team under your stewardship, again, does it make you toot your own horn a little bit more? You've long been an advocate for former
yeah,
players and specifically for women to be given these opportunities to take leadership roles, and how sometimes experience, depending on what someone's background is, might look different for different candidates and
yeah,
decision makers making those calls.
yeah.
Does it feel like this also is just a really good example of hire women, hire people with diverse backgrounds, and you're
Yeah,
going to see some of that success?
I think I say this when we talk about hiring women, and I say this when we talk about hiring former players: hire the right women and
Hmm.
hire the right former players. Because I don't think I'll be honest with you. Like, I don't think being a former player qualifies you for this job. It
Yeah.
doesn't. I'll just tell you, being a
Hmm.
former player alone in and of itself does not qualify you for this job. It gives you an excellent context, and it gives you an understanding that I think individuals who are not former pro players in the NWSL don't have. Like, there are a lot of conversations that I'll have with our athletes where I like genuinely understand it because I have been there and I have done it, and in the early days when it was not pretty.
Yeah.
And so it gives you the context, but there are so many things, especially for somebody like myself who's the vice president of soccer ops and general manager. Like, it's not just signing athletes, right? Like, I am managing the staff and making sure that they're getting the professional development opportunities that they need, and mentoring them and ensuring that the decisions that they're making they feel confident in, and then also navigating things with players, right? So overseeing all of our team ops and our player care and all of those things. So for me, like, I can just tell you, I would not have been equipped to be in this role if I didn't have a decade of experience as a Marine Corps officer, if I didn't
Yeah.
have a JD and was a licensed attorney, if I didn't have an MBA and understand really well how to read a P&L and how
Hmm.
to put together a budget. Like, these are all skill sets that you really need that as a player you don't necessarily walk out of the game with. And so, we talk about like no side hustles, right? Like, when I was playing in the NWSL, soccer was my side hustle. I had a full-time
Right.
job the whole time I was playing. So, I think the more we can help athletes develop while they're playing, the better. And it's something that we've taken on board here in Orlando. We're really serious about preparing athletes for that transition and getting them as many professional development opportunities as we can, whether they're shadowing with different parts of the club, or they're even
Hmm.
shadowing with Orlando Health, or they're shadowing with industries and companies outside of the game that are within the greater Orlando area, because some of them they want to completely leave sport
Hmm.
at the end of their time. It's really important. So, I think I'm just a good example of what, to your point, having a diverse background looks like. And I would say as well, like, the Wills took a chance on me. I spoke with 3 NWSL clubs. Orlando was one of the 3, but I spoke with 3 NWSL clubs, and the Wills were like bought into what I brought to
Hmm.
the table. And I think for me as well, it was important that I was going to be in a club where the values aligned. I felt like what I brought to the table was going to be appreciated, and that I was going to be given the runway to do what I felt like needed to be done in the best interest of the club and the best interest of the athletes and even the league. So I'm incredibly fortunate that I interviewed and worked with a ownership group that saw what I had to bring to the table, because I think that's the other thing too, is a lot of times I almost had to be overqualified to
Hmm.
get into this position. When you look at the years of time in the NWSL and some of the previous hires that were made for managing directors or GMs, oftentimes they were men who lacked the kind of experience, that basic experience that you would want out of that position. And women like me were getting passed over for years, and so that frustration mounted. But I just got really fortunate that all of the stars aligned when they did, and here I am, like, living my dream job in Orlando.
And crushing it, by the way.
Thanks.
So maybe this good kind of last question for this topic is just, I think with where athletes are, and you have seen this on both sides of, in the early days of the league, the resources for players, just even like salary for playing soccer was not there.
Yeah.
Now there's been more of a push of these players should be allowed to maybe only play soccer, if that no more side hustles, that conversation of they shouldn't have to do that to make a living wage. But maybe would you say that your journey is a testament to side hustles, quote unquote, or those other investing in other things from the club side isn't a bad thing for players, especially if they want to keep
Yeah,
carrying the game forward?
it's about growth as a
Yeah.
human and as a player. Like, I think the difference between in the now versus the early days, like, you had to have a side hustle to make a
Right.
living wage.
Right.
And I think now it's presented more as an opportunity to grow and develop and expand your experiences in different fields, or figure out really what you want to do. The reality is, and we talk about this, it doesn't matter if you're a staff member or an athlete. Whoever comes to Orlando Pride at some point is going to leave Orlando Pride.
Right.
Whether it's retirement, or they get waived, or they get traded, or they take an agreement somewhere else. They're a free agent and they move somewhere else. Everybody's going to leave. And
Hmm.
so for us, the key is to make sure that people are in a better place when they leave Orlando than they were when they got here. And that's both as a player and as a person. And So that's just how we approach it is. And I will tell you, for us, especially this year, I've worked with Meg Monofusco and Simone Charlie, two of our athletes who are on SEI, to really help empower them and give them some responsibility and leadership opportunity. They're working on putting together what programming for players look like. So, because nobody cares what the GM thinks. Players don't care what the GM thinks. And so the players are working together to get feedback and buy-in from the athletes on, oh, we'd really like to learn about like investment 101. Like, what does it mean to have our league 401k and or home buying and car buying? Like, what are the things we should consider as we're preparing for that? Things like that the players are really driving. Like, these are the things that we'd like to learn about. Or, we would like to shadow brand alliances and learn about who our club is partnering with and how they navigate those things. So we've created a space where the players really get to drive what that looks like for them. And then we just sort of facilitate it and schedule it. And I think that by giving players ownership of that, one, the quality of the content is better, but also I think they get more out of it.
Yeah. So last overall question here. I mean, we started with the really small. We started with like this weekend, right?
Yeah.
But for you as a general manager, this is about long, sustained growth, sustained excellence.
Yeah.
Like you said earlier, maybe the results are coming even a little bit sooner than the long-term plan was.
Yeah.
What does this season, I'm sure again, championship ambitions, Shield ambitions, but what does this season represent for you as a general manager and your ambitions for that just sustained success going forward?
Yeah, I think it's just the beginning. Like, genuinely, it's just the beginning. And it's an exciting place to be because everybody is bought in. And of course, yeah, we want to win an NWSL championship. We want to win the Shield. That's why we're all here. But I think for us, like, our focus is so much on things other than results. And I said in the beginning when I was hired that if I have to believe that if you do the right things, the results will start to come. And for us, like, our focus continues to be on doing the right things. And the results are coming. They are admittedly coming a lot faster, I think, than we had expected necessarily. But we've got a really special group of athletes. And when I first stood in front of them last year, we talked about there not being any reason why the Orlando Pride can't be at the top of the table and stay at the top of the table. And they just have to find that confidence in themselves, and that we would work with them to give them the tools, give them the teammates, give them the space and the environment to be able to go and find that success. And so for us this year, what this year is about is ensuring that we are continuing to do those things right. Like, we are continuing to treat players well, to make sure that they feel valued, to make sure that they feel empowered in the environment. And, not everybody is going to play, not everybody is going to travel, but are we creating a space where even those athletes feel like they're growing and they're developing and they're contributing? Because every single person in our environment is contributing to the success that we have this year. And so we want to keep that moving forward. And the way that we keep that moving forward is we don't necessarily focus on results. We focus on, the day-to-day decision-making that really is the impetus of the culture that we're building. That's why sometimes I can't even look at the standings. I'm just,
yeah, right.
Yeah.
Too successful. It's happening fast.
Just every day you show up, you do the same things, and you keep it cool.
Yeah.
But it's fun, and it's a lot of fun for the athletes. And, we make fun of Emily Sams for saying having a good time all the time, but it's real. It's very real. Everybody here is having a really good time, and we enjoy the game, and that's how it should be. It's work and it's stressful, but it's a game. And if we're not enjoying it, not having fun with it, then we need to get out.
Yeah. I think that's the ethos, right, for the Orlando Pride this season, having fun and
having
playing
a good time
well.
all the time.
That's right, having a good time all the time. Perfect. That's the best closer I could think of. Thank you so much, Haley Carter, General Manager for the Orlando Pride. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks.